Hello and welcome to the Gooners pod. Is this the first pod of the season, Mike? I don't think.
This is episode 50 of season number 6. It's just the first one we've done in like a month or two. So welcome back to the Gooners podcast, where we do a podcast by Gooners about Arsenal and other stuff. And we have a very special panel with us tonight. And let's get right into it. We are missing 2 people tonight. And so we brought in the wonderful Ryan to join us on short notice. Thanks, Ryan, for coming.
No problem. Thank you.
Good to see you. And are you happy to know that I am now safely out of your country, where you don't have to look over your shoulder every 2 hours and run into me? Because it was getting a little ridiculous there in early November.
I enjoyed having you here.
I mean, like, you know, we saw each other at the 89 thing at the Barbican, which was fantastic. They did an outstanding tribute to your family. The Arsene Wenger event. I mean, like, and I saw you some other times when you didn't know I was around, because I was just following you around, but I could see you looking over your shoulder, like, is he there? Is he there? So, you know, in any case, it was great to get to see you as many times as I did when I was over. But thanks for joining us. We're gonna have some fun tonight, and Andy and Owen are here because Jared is unable to be on the pod for another couple of weeks because his job involves helping people in need. And with the tornadoes in Kansas, in Kentucky, especially Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, but mostly in Kentucky, he's been out helping people in need. And meanwhile, speaking of which, Mikey Hers is apparently sitting on the side of the road in the rain as his truck for work has busted a spring or something like that. So it's crazy. We got Jared doing good things and Mikey needing good things, and no one doing
nothing. Doing absolutely nothing. Hey, Mike, I hope your insurance is good.
Owen, good to see you again. Living in temporary housing as well.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm just floating. I never want you to know where my actual location is, so I just keep moving.
It moves smart. Around.
That's smart. It's a mistake I made, and I regret.
But it's also good to see Ryan as well, because I think the last time we talked to him, we were both highly intoxicated.
And by both, he means me and him, not
you, Ryan. You were fine. In fact, you were great. We were just awful.
No. That was a good night, actually.
I actually didn't drink anything that day. I was just high with the enjoyment of a massive victory against Aston Villa. I mean, life was good enough. Speaking of high, he lives in the Mile High City. He came up with the idea for this podcast and then left. Kind of like, you know, a baby daddy. So welcome back to the baby daddy, Andy. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I'm on all the text messages about not wanting to pod, but yeah.
Thanks for allowing me to get on my computer, press the button, get on the website that I own and created, and be on the podcast that I own.
Hey, you had to send me the digital login code though, so that's true. You do have some power.
That's true. So we also will have a 5th guest joining us a little bit later in the hour, a West Ham supporter who is a good friend of mine. Our kids used to play football together. I may have mentioned him on the podcast a couple of times. Oh, and you met him and his son outside of London Stadium when we went there before they battered Spurs on that wonderful afternoon. And he's going to give us his views when we start to preview West Ham. And he also has got something special and serious from a charitable and from a cancer standpoint that obviously this is an appropriate venue to bring up. So let's wait on AubamaWHO and just talk about the positives of West Ham first. Ryan, same exact starting 11, 2 completely different performances between Everton and West Ham. So I'm almost happy in hindsight that he did start the exact same 11, just so we could dissect, you know, is it the players? Is it the manager? Is it his tactics? Because, boy, did we get a different reaction and mentality from these players from one game to the next.
Yeah, we definitely did. You know, it's such a strange way of going about it against Everton. Like, not needed at all. We could have easily won that game if we just attacked. I don't know why we didn't. Well, the tactics seem so bizarre to me. Obviously, I'm a Mikel fan, so. But I admitted that was really poor. Like the game was there. I felt like the Everton crowd, we gave them, as I think you've seen them yesterday, they're not a happy bunch of fans at the minute, but for some reason we gave them something to believe. And it was a really disheartening performance because I thought against Man United beforehand, I don't think we played well, but I don't think we played badly. And I think we did. If we could have got something, if we had won that Everton game, that all of a sudden week doesn't look too bad. But then to have those 2 losses, and it just feels like with Mikel, like anytime we lose a game, it's everyone. Not everyone, but a lot of the fans are kind of ready to jump on him. And then when you lose 2 games, it's like, you hear people talking about like changing it and stuff like that. So,
well, it's really the first time it had happened since the obviously the rough August of 3 losses in a row to start the season. I mean, the recovery, the reaction to a loss had so far been fairly good.
Yeah.
Which is why I think Everton was such a stomach punch.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, I mean, the Saturday was really important because if that was another loss or drop points, the situation would be looking really bleak. But as it is, we won that game. Played after the first 20 minutes, which was really, really poor. After that, once we scored that goal, we just went into a different gear, and I thought we played really well for parts of that match. And the fact that West Ham drew as well just means that it looks like if the fixtures up until that Man City game, it looks like we could potentially be in a good position, but we've got to go and do the business.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, the reaction for you, I mean, the Southampton hasn't been in a really good run of form. They might be, after watching this game, the team I think is most likely to go down at this point. I mean, along with Norwich, because you've just got to expect Newcastle is going to pick up some points along the way. But Southampton, I mean, was Southampton that bad? Were we that good? What was different for you between Monday and Saturday?
Well, I thought the game Saturday started off like the game ended Monday. I mean, there was a moment where I was like, all right, Southampton are bringing it. And then there was like those fluke sequence of events where we scored, relatively quickly during that process. And then all of a sudden we just were in cruise control. But to kind of echo Ryan, it's frustrating that against Everton, we play so well and then foot off the gas. And we keep seeing it over and over again. And I can't fault Arteta too much for that because he's not probably telling him, hey, we're in third gear now. The players have to step up at that point. But I think I think we were awfully lucky on the first goal, just out of how quickly that sequence of like being pressured by Southampton, and then it was crazy amount of passes and we scored, and then it just seemed like the wheels fell off for them. But I think towards the end of the season we're going to see it more for us because we're not in European football, and West Ham United are probably going to go a little bit deeper in competition. But we have to take advantage of the other teams dropping points around us. And that's by beating Newcastle, showing better against United, and certainly not letting Everton do what they did. I mean, that was absurd.
Yeah. So, Owen, the mentality of the team. I mean, after the first goal was the the brilliant team goal playing out of the back, right? If it wasn't the header. Okay. So, I mean, after that, we've been watching all season how we tend to sit back. Now, there's a big debate going on about whether those are Arteta's safe and playing not to lose tactics, or as many more people are starting to come out, people who have been to the games, people who are a little bit more clued in, are saying it's the exact opposite of his tactics. It's just what the players are kind of doing out of their own fear. So we saw a very different. I mean, it's almost to the point where the first goal, whoever scores the first goal in the game doesn't matter. Especially if it's us. It's whoever scores the second goal in the game that matters. Yeah. Is that the feeling you get?
Yeah, and it's funny. It's something I've been really conflicted about over this past few weeks. especially really since the Liverpool game, I would say that it's sort of been prevalent that that's what that's what we tend to do, is that we score a goal, we sit back and we try to defend it with our lives. Which look, obviously people being at the games, and I myself haven't been at the games and stuff, you do see Mikel Arteta gesturing to the players to get the line higher up, to press higher, to stop sitting so deep. But then I don't think it's coincidence that the players do sit back on such a regular basis when that scenario does happen, when we go 1-0 up. You know, I find it very difficult to believe that every single player on the pitch all aligned with one another, say together, right, okay, we're going to start to sit back, and that's what happens, because I think we've got players within our side that's just not their natural game. You know, it's Gabriel Martinelli, Pepe, Aubameyang, Lacazette, Odegaard, all these players whose natural instinct is to attack. Now, to sort of play devil's advocate with myself, what I would say is that this is potentially one of the downsides to having such a young side, such a youthful side, that when they get into these positions of 1-0 up in games, maybe where they weren't expecting to as early on as they do, that their natural instinct is to panic and think, Jesus, we weren't expecting to be here, let's just hold on to this. And regardless of what the manager's saying, because I've played football, Ryan, you've played football, how often when you're standing and the manager's shouting stuff at you from the sideline, do you just sit and go, what the fuck up, dickhead? You know, you ignore a lot of what the manager says during game time. The work should be put in before the match. So I'm sort of tossed on it.
Do you think it's down to age, Owen? Because cooler heads, older heads see the lead. They know how to, you know, like, I hate to use him as an example because everyone hates him, but like a Xhaka, for example, knows how to make the game, manage it, but manage the team around him, right? Mm-hmm. When he's not in the lineup, Aubameyang's fucking useless at this point. Everyone else is like 22 years old. So is it something down to age where they just don't know game management yet? Which is absurd to say, but it is part of the match, right?
I think you could say it's down to age. I would say it's down to character traits within our side. And I think that's something we've massively lacked it. Now, the thing is that the character traits that have the ability to change a game and manage a game are much less prevalent in younger players, which we have. But what I would say is that, like you and Ryan both said, is that we started that game very much like we ended the Everton game. I think it was Southampton had 5 shots with 3 on target before we registered our first shot, which was a shot on target, which was our first goal. And what I mean by the traits within players within our side, to me, it all started with Aaron Ramsdale, the bravery to play out from the back there, to turn around and say, do you want to know what? Fuck this. I'm not going to sit here and hit it long, and I'm not going to do what everybody expects us to do. I'm going to grab the game by the scruff of the neck, and I'm going to personally take a risk and make a difference. If it goes wrong, it's egg on my face. But it's people like Aaron Ramsdale that we need within our side, people like Tomiyasu, who, if you watch that first goal back again, very pretty stuff, brilliant ball in from Saka, a fantastic finish from Alexander Lacazette. But watch the build-up that Tomiyasu does, and not only the build-up, the effort. He's absolutely busting his ass to get into the box and was in a prime scoring position if the ball had fallen short for Alexander Lacazette. So I think that what we're now starting to see is traits of players that we have lacked massively over the last few years. And this is where... This is the last thing I'll say about my big monologue before I pass it over to you guys, is that something that's really frustrated me is people keep saying, oh, the players aren't good enough, the players aren't this. I'm not going to name them all like I've done before, but Mikel Arteta's starting 11 now are either all players that he has signed or re-signed. So they are his players, absolutely, and I don't take this thing the players aren't good enough anymore, because they obviously are. But what I will say is that whilst this gives us a bit of respite of the pressure on Mikel Arteta, we need to start winning the games that matters, and that was games like United, like Everton. These are games that we needed to capitalise to sustain that push for top 4 in Champions League place come the end of the season, and they're the games that we could potentially look back on and say that we're slipping up in them. And for me, going into the West Ham game, that's absolutely one of them games.
Yeah. And Ryan, let me ask you something, because as a guy who hasn't played football since I was, real football since I was a teenager, whether the team decides to keep pushing forward or protect the lead. I mean, we've seen both. We've seen the team push forward as of, in the Southampton game. We've seen them kind of sit back and try to protect the lead against Everton and against United. But is there a position on the pitch that really controls that? I mean, in my mind, you know, you can't really point to anybody other than the midfield as kind of the dictators of whether we're still pushing forward or whether we're sitting back. I mean, the offense is always going to push forward. The defense is always going to kind of hang back, and you know, with the exception of maybe a Ben White who marauded forward. So, is it the midfielders? Is it the fullbacks? Who decides that?
It's really difficult to say because with Arsenal, I feel like watching it either feels like it's play out from the back, or it's just like a looping long ball that just results in us losing possession. And for some reason, it's never a ball into the wide areas. Like, do you know what I mean? Like Aubameyang or whoever's up front, like just the keeper can roll it out to Tomiyasu, and he just plays the ball down the line. Something different. Do you know what I mean? It always feels like we play the two tactics. We either try and play it out from the back. I think it's proven that with the amount of goals that we like what we scored on Saturday, that first one, we scored a lot of them under Mikel. That's his way of wanting to do it. But I think it's when that goes wrong, or when that, you know, when the opposition gets a bit of confidence and presses us high or whatever, and it's like, oh, okay, that's gone wrong. That's where I'm struggling with it. And I to answer your question, I don't know exactly who. Possibly you could say Ramsdale should be the one who be like, well, you know, I'm going to play it in there, into that area of the field. So Aubameyang, I want you to stretch it, you know, maybe win a throw-in up in that area.
I'm just not seeing a lot of connectivity between the front and the back. I'm seeing it kind of go around the middle. And we talked about this. I was in Richmond for the game, joining Tom and Joey and Ryan doing the Richmond Gooners podcast, which was actually, it's really fun. It's very unique. If you can't figure out how it's unique, then I'm not going to tell you, Mikey Hers. But you know, it's almost like what would you expect the heat map from that game to look like? To me, it looked like this. Now this is the official heat map. The red is where most of the traffic is. The yellow is the second. The green is a little bit, and then when there's nothing, you've got Partey and Xhaka in the middle there, just sitting on their tuchuses.
But see, can I even throw something back to Ryan there, because just while you were answering, Ryan, something popped into my head, and it's that Mikel Arteta's style of football to me seems like almost like Goldilocks football, where everything needs to be just right for it to work, and what sort of aggravates me is the lack of variety in our performances. You know, we either go from spamming the ball down to Kieran Tierney and whacking it in from there, or whether it's forcing to play out from the back, or as you said, whether it's whacking long balls over the tops of defence. But we lack variety. And for me, it's, you get success through variety, because then the opposition doesn't know what to expect every time. You know, if we're only travelling down one avenue of the pitch consistently, it's very easy to set up and defend against that. Do you think that that's the manager, or do you think that that's the players choosing that say, for example, the automatic link up that people associate with Granit Xhaka playing the ball out to Kieran Tierney, for example? Do you think that these are players' connections, or that these are coach things?
No, I think that they're definitely coach things. I think there are patterns of play that are worked on and that have brought success. It's just that they haven't consistently brought success, which is the sort of the major group, I think. I think what you said, Owen, was really about, especially Arteta's team, is a really good point. Is that what I'd say is we still haven't signed a forward. Arteta still hasn't really signed a forward player. In that, the last forward we signed, I think, was Pepe. If you're not including Odegaard, so he still hasn't quite got the team. I know. You can't get the exact 11. It's, you know, to come in and demand to spend that much money to get your exact.
Yeah, because I suppose the counter argument to that would be is every other coach in the Premier League has inherited other people's players as well.
Yeah, so I think what he's doing is he's trying to get the best out of what he's got to an extent. But where the criticism of him that I'd have is that he hasn't adapted it enough for when we can. We have seen examples of him do it. Like we played Lacazette and Aubameyang up top together, and that worked for a bit. Martinelli's now come in, and that's working. But it's just, it feels like none of these are quite what he wants long term. But I don't think he's done quite enough, Mikel, to make the most out of what he's got. I would say that he hasn't quite done enough.
We talked at the pub actually about Andy, about how it had been so long since anyone could remember a goal that came pretty much right up directly through the middle. And the irony was, directly after we said that, there was a passage of play where Lacazette had kind of a give and go, and he was driving down the middle. I forget whether it was first half or second half. I think it was whatever half we scored all of our goals in. We were headed to the right, left to right on the screen, and Lacazette just had a heavy touch. He waited a little bit too long to pull the trigger, and it was taken by the defense. But that was like the only time that it happened, which is why I brought up the whole heat map. This is the actual heat map from the game, like literally the actual heat map, and I believe this goes from left to right, and to have that kind of a gaping hole in the middle of the pitch, and really in the middle of the pitch here, just kind of shows you there is no direct attacking going on, from a build-up play. The only time that we really went right down the middle was Ramsdale to Martinelli for a breakaway. Andy, you got to unmute yourself. This is the heat map that Andy likes to see, by the way. Yeah. This is his preferred heat map. But
I haven't done this in a while. It's hard to get the mic on. No, I mean, if you look at tactically the way that Pep Guardiola plays at City, it's the same way. They push out wide to stretch the field, and then they try and cut back across, because then you've got more people in a man-for-man situation. I don't see that hole in the middle, Mike, being a huge problem against Southampton, because my guess is the defense is high enough up where that little hole is probably where there's just space in front of them that no one's occupying from Southampton. I bet if you found like the heat map against Liverpool or a better side that retains possession, it's probably completely different.
Well, yeah, it was all the heat map against Liverpool was just completely in our goal box.
Yeah, it was just Ramsdale holding, just saving the ball.
It's like a red block that takes up our 18 and then nothing else.
Yeah, but I think I said it in the group, like, we as Arsenal fans don't deserve Saka. Like, I made a joke the last time I think I was on the pod, like, I'm really excited for when he wins the league with City in a year or two, because we don't deserve him as a player. We tactically, it's just give him the ball. That's why it's out wide all the time. It's just like, hey, give the ball to number 7. He's better than everyone else, and he just goes and does his stuff. And I mean, it would have been great if he had scored that goal. That just, God, that shot came from nowhere, like literally nowhere. It would have been unbelievable. But that's why, Mike, we're just going out wide. Is just kick the ball to him. And now,
Daniel, I thought the same exact thing. I thought he said the exact same thing. I'm like,
right.
When do we call it soccer, and why don't we deserve it? But
well, and we're starting to not deserve Martinelli. I mean, the kid doesn't know how to go backwards or forwards. Like, he reminds me a lot of, and I hate this comparison because people are going to just think of the legendary player, but like, if you gave Thierry Henry the ball anywhere on the pitch, it was, I'm going to goal and there's nowhere else I'm going to go. And that's what Martinelli's like. He has that characteristic where Saka will cut in, do a 1-2. Martinelli's like, fuck it, there's 6 people in front of me, I'll just try to dribble through all of them. And I love it. So that's why we're going out wide, is because you've got those 2 attacking players who will just go crazy with it.
Martinelli's like when you have like a 15-month-old who recently learned how to walk and run, and you hold them about a foot off the ground and their feet are just going like this.
Yeah.
And you put them down on the ground and they
yeah.
He's like an Alexis Sanchez that doesn't slither. Absolute fucking snake. No, but
I'm not used to being on a podcast where I'm the one who's cursing the least of anyone.
Ryan's gone. He didn't like that.
Oh.
He didn't like my Alexis Sanchez. He's still got a Sanchez jersey. Sorry, Ryan. No, but do you want to know something that I was just going to mention when we're talking about Martinelli there? Something that stood out for me with not only Martinelli but this team that we're assembling at the minute too was there's a bit of shithousery within this side. I think it was for Martin Odegaard's goal, who I'm sure we'll talk about later. There was a little touch from Martinelli off the ball, and I think that's things that you don't get with players like Nicola Pepe, Aubameyang, Lacazette. The unselfishness to throw your body between your man and an opposition player, to make space for your man. Unselfish things that isn't going to get you the headlines, but makes massive differences within the game. And as I say, there are things you don't get with these so-called glamour type players, but you will get with enthusiastic, youthful players like Gabriel Martinelli.
And I think with Gabriel, there's been a 6-month period where he has not played. And I think that's been harsh and unfair. And I think he's overcompensating right now because he even alluded to it in the interview. Like, if I'm on the pitch, I'm playing 100, I'm going full, because he wants to prove I shouldn't be dropped, and he shouldn't be, right?
Well, that's the right reaction. That's what you should
no,
do.
it's totally right reaction.
And waiting for your turn.
When you have a 20-year-old attacking winger striker who fits essentially the same positional mold as Aubameyang, but actually wants to work for it, it just pushes Aubameyang further and further back down the pecking order.
So before we get too deep into Aubameyang, and Ryan, I'm interested in your among everyone's opinion on that. Let's talk about the two biggest positives. I think everybody had two players' names in their mouth for man of the match in this game, and it was one of those games where you could really give high mark to a lot of different people, but the two people that everyone wanted to rant and rave about is Martin Odegaard and Tomiyasu. Sorry. I mean, they were both immense. So pick one of them. I'm going to go around the horn, starting with you, Ryan. And pick one of them or both if you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I mean, just tell me what your thoughts are on the game that they had and how they've established themselves in the club. Because until recently, at least one of them was catching a little bit of criticism and being told he deserved to be on the bench.
Yeah, okay. I'll go with Odegaard then. I think the criticism that he was getting at the start of the season was basically because we had signed him and he had played for us last season. I honestly think if he hadn't played for us last season, everybody would have been really excited to sign Odegaard. But because he had played for us and there was some links with like Maddison and stuff, I think like people weren't that keen on Odegaard, and he started a little bit slow, other than the free kick against Burnley. But I thought the criticism was so over the top, really.
Very knee jerk.
Because considering I think there was an injury in there as well, and then we played Aubameyang and Lacazette, which worked for 2 or 3 games up front, so he didn't come on. And I think all our attackers will have. I think Emmy at the minute is going to might have a couple of games now on the bench, despite how well he's played, because that's kind of what happens at top teams. I know we're not there just yet, but you kind of have some time rotation. But I think Odegaard is getting more. I like him a lot when he's had a few games under his belt. I thought like that about him last year. Like, he's took a while, and I remember, funnily enough, when we played West Ham last year. I don't know if you guys can remember that game when it was 3-3. I thought he was excellent in that game. What was I going to say? He's not.
It's one of them things, Ryan. When you're that type of player, that he's so technical, and his entire game is built around these finesse touches and perfectly weighted passes and perfectly timed passes that you really need to have your craft honed before you can be playing at the top of your game. And he's just one of them players that needs to have minutes under his belt to fully flourish, isn't he?
Definitely, and I think a lot of what he does as well is like. It's not always, for example, if you compare him to, let's compare him to Bruno Fernandes, for example. Everything he does, Bruno Fernandes, is like Hollywoodish. So like when it works, it looks amazing, and everyone plays a forward pass and it's like wow, or shoots from 30 yards. Whereas like Odegaard's more like he's not quite as out there, but he's still. If you look at even in that first goal. Against Southampton, there was a lovely touch and forward pass from him. That stuff, those sort of 5-10 yard progressive passes are really important in football.
I always call him like he's like the drummer of the team, where he like sets the rhythm, sets the tempo, and often you don't really understand exactly what he's doing until he's removed out of the side, and then you see, because that's why I think our upturn in form in January last season was so good. Yes, obviously down to the form of Emile Smith-Rowe, but also the difference that Martin Odegaard made in terms of setting a tempo that Arsenal really lacked, I think, since a player like Santi Cazorla or somebody like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. One thing I'll say, I want him to do a bit more is I do want him to. I do feel like sometimes if he scores, it's like he don't shoot again. You know what I mean? Because he scored, like, because I want him to be like that selfish player, because I actually think he could score a lot of goals because he's technically such a good player.
And that could come along with being young and assimilating into a squad, being kind of one of the last people in. I mean, I guess, some people naturally would just take over and start bullying the pitch and saying, while I'm hot, I'm going to keep, in basketball, you make 3 threes in a row, you're just going to keep throwing them up until you miss.
Yeah.
In football, it's more of a team sport. So I would think that's still to come. Because I agree with you, Ryan, but I think that's still, he's going to have that in his locker.
Yeah.
People forget too, Mike, as well, is that Martin Odegaard is a year older than Emile Smith-Rowe. We talk about him as if he's this sort of seasoned pro that we expect massive output from, but he's in the same age bracket as Saka, Smith-Rowe.
Yeah, it's just the Freddie Adu thing where he's 23, but he seems like he's been playing for 91 straight years. So Odegaard, I mean, some games have gone by where you're like, where is Odegaard? Has he touched the ball? Is he on the pitch? Yesterday, all you could see was him bossing it. Owen, you want to talk about Tommy?
Yeah, it's funny because I forget that fucking idiot's name that was on Sky Sports saying that he's not even a right back or whoever he was. Mike Hernandez. Who the fuck's that guy? No,
this guy's got foul mouths today.
Man, I'm Irish. I get away with it.
Mike.
It's fuck you, Mike. Look, TomiYasu, I think, is somebody who came in completely under the radar. Nobody really knew what to expect from him. There was, as I said, those quotes from that idiot on Sky Sports saying that I'm sorry, I know he's one of your mates. Is he? Is he one of your mates?
Is Cave one of your?
Cave, that's your mates. You're fucking friends with all those guys.
Mine?
Yeah, you.
Oh no, I thought you were asking Ryan. No, Cave is. I don't know him.
Yeah, he's a twat.
A ball bag, we would say over here. Anyway, yeah.
He's the Arlo White of Sky Sports, Mike.
Anyway,
Ryan, I invited you tonight thinking that these guys could control themselves.
Dude, I already told you my situation. It is gone, so.
Yeah. I think we should dip into that after I answer this. But look, very well-rounded player, but exceeded my expectations massively. And there's this conversation that I'm sure we're going to get onto in a little bit about captaincy. And if you're talking about a player that leads by example, plays 7 out of 10 every week, consistent down to a T, I think that TomiYasu has to be in that conversation as well, because I think if you're looking for a consistent performer, he's not picking up any player of the months or anything like that, but he's just steady Eddie at the minute. I'm liking everything I'm seeing from him.
I mean, how do you remember how excruciating last season was with regards to 4 different people that could be playing in that right back role? I mean, whether it was Bellerin or Cedric or Mainsley or Chambers, literally, I mean.
Maybe that's the thing too, Mike.
And there was no consistency.
And that I never even mentioned there was that, like, we talk about, the resilience of Granit Xhaka being available and playing everything. When was the last time anybody deputized for TomiYasu in the right back role? I know we don't have European football, but we're seeing other players fatigue around the side at certain parts of the season, whereas he seems to be.
Some guys are just built differently. I mean, and some people adjust to the Premier League differently than others.
He's also only 23 as well. That helps.
It's all that baloney that he ate while he was in Italy.
If you would have told me on transfer deadline day that a 6-foot-something Japanese guy was going to be our right back and likely our best player, that
from a club that almost no one pays attention to,
and we'd never heard of, I would have been like, you're absolutely crazy. But he has been absolutely rock solid. For me, my man of the match in the game was Ramsdale, and not just because he kept us in the in the match. It's what he does off the ball. And I've been saying it for years. And it's the first player since I can remember, probably Patrick Vieira, who actually screams at his teammates that, that will actually give them, well, maybe Jans Lehmann, but Koscielny didn't do it. Almunia didn't do it. Szczesny didn't do it, right? We've had a string of keepers who didn't do it. And so Leno didn't do it. So it's just like, for me, it's what he does off the ball. It's the positioning. It's getting people back. Now, granted, with Gabriel and White playing so well in front of him, he's not facing nearly as many shots as Leno did last season. But it's the stuff he does off the ball. And there's just like that first save he made where it went down to his lower right. The shot came out of nowhere. He was quick to react. I think that beats 7 out of 10 keepers because they just see it late. And they're standing. It's one of those where they're falling back being like, shit. He was down there with moments like to spare. So, I would take him for sure.
Yeah, that didn't work.
But you know what I love? Like,
I was literally
his knee slide, which
I was literally just going to ask about that because I was going to say to Ryan, like, Andy's talking about the stuff that Ramsdale does off the ball. See that shit sliding on the knees and fucking.
But did you see the video that went viral with the Leicester fans when they were like giving it to him and then he actually cheered? It's just like.
Yeah.
But
that matters, doesn't it? Doesn't that matter? That sort of character.
It totally does.
Stuff.
Like, we're gonna have another one of them on in a minute. But like, my dad hates Arsenal. He's diehard West Ham, and like, he sent me that video and said, "I love that he gets involved with your team, right? Because that's what you want in a keeper. You want someone back there." And he just seems like he's living. He won the lottery, right?
How hard would that be for any player? Like, I mean, we've heard of the players that grew up Arsenal fans, that love Arsenal fans. I don't even know that Ramsdale's not a Gooner, is he?
No, but it's a little easier to get away with it when you're a keeper, Mike, because your attention isn't 100% on the match.
That's true. Like when Giroud was
with,
doing the scorpion kick dance after he scored. I mean, you can get criticism if you're too whacked out like that. So I guess you're right about that being for a goalkeeper. But I mean,
this just shows his mentality. I watched him on it's like a golf channel thing that I would watch with Tubes from Soccer AM. I'm not sure if you remember him, but Ramsdale was on with him and they were talking about the interaction with the away fans when he turns around, for example, with Leicester. And he was saying the reason he does it is because he thinks that if he is fucking around with them and bantering with them, that then he thinks, well, Jesus, I can't be making some stupid mistake now or they're going to absolutely ravage me for those mistakes. And I think that's an unbelievable mindset to have. I think to be putting not only the pressure of yourself for playing for Arsenal, but adding additional pressure to yourself by design almost.
I think it also helps that he's English and he's in the England setup because regardless of, unless you're Spurs, if Ramsdale goes away and has a good match, there's a good group of people who are still applauding and cheer him on, right? Pickford, for as much as, aside from Liverpool, like I still watch him and he makes a great save and you're a little bit prouder because he's your national keeper, right?
Didn't you go on Owen's second favorite podcast to Joe Rogan, the Ben Foster podcast, directly after the game against Watford?
He did go on. He's been on there a couple times, Ramsdale. But I just think that plays into the mind of the away fans who are sitting so close to him. Is when you do have a keeper that's in the national setup, there's a different relationship than had it been, Mendy or someone that's not English. I think there is a little bit different of a relationship.
My God, we have not even gotten to AubamaWHO yet. But so I'll tell you what. I'm going to skip this. I wanted to talk about Partey and Xhaka. But that, knowing how Andy feels about Granit Xhaka, I think, to talk tactically about how much he sucked on Saturday, despite our good win, I think would probably lead us down the wrong path. So before we talk about AubamaWHO, we have one player who has been a huge part of our team who's getting himself back to fitness. Now, we started the same 11, 2 games in a row. There was 5 days in between matches. Now we have 3. Assuming ESR is healthy enough to start on Wednesday, I did a poll online. Who gets replaced by him, or do you not start him? Do you bring him off the bench? So before I put the poll results up, Owen, who do you basically make way for him, at least for the beginning of the game? Let's say he's able to play 70 minutes from the 11 that we started. Who do you pull out?
It's a super difficult one, because I'm a firm believer in merit and you know, the players getting to retain their positions after good performances, and who do you strip out of the starting 11 after that? Because you'd have to say that Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka, Odegaard and Alexander Lacazette all had brilliant games, and you know, every single one of them would have the right to feel hard done by, to be missing out on such a big game like West Ham. So for me, look, this is something that I've seen multiple people doing of, what system can we do to squeeze all these players in? And it's like, let's just stop. Competition's good. Competition, pressure breeds diamonds, and the fact that they'll all be going out onto the pitch, everyone that I've just mentioned there, knowing that a player like Emile Smith-Rowe is biting at their heels to get into their positions, it's only going to raise performance levels. So for me, I would be keeping it the same to start, and then we can assess the situation after the start of the second half and see if anybody's legs are tiring or anybody's underperforming or whatever. But for me, don't fix something that's not broke.
Yeah, and I could probably actually share that, because I mean, what better guy to bring off the bench if things are getting a little slow than Emile Smith-Rowe? Ryan, would you slot him right back in, and if so, who would you rotate out?
Yeah, completely agree with every word that Owen said. I don't see how we can. I don't see why we have to get players back. We have to get them back in. It's like, no, if you come out, then and the team do well, then you stay
at the back of the line.
Look at, not like the back of the line, but it's like if you look at all the, like, for example, look at like Jota at Liverpool. Like, they're not just bringing. All right, then Firmino might be injured, but they don't just bring him in. It's like Chalobah at Chelsea, the centre back. He's gone in. He's done a really good job, so he's in. It's like that. That's just how it works. At Man City, sometimes Laporte, who I think is still one of the best centre backs in the league, he's sometimes out there. If he's not in, I know we're not on that level yet, but I don't think I really love Emmy. I really love him, but I don't think he's on that level where it's. I don't think he's got that reputation where it's like he's straight back in now, and I don't think any of our attackers have that actually. So
I think it hasn't Arteta kind of proven with the attackers, like if you play well, you're staying. Like Lacazette for a long run didn't play, came on as a sub, performed well. Now he's pretty much a stalemate, right? And so I think he's good at easing him back in. But heading into the Christmas period, Mike, I wouldn't rush anyone back.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. The poll that we ran was mostly Xhaka or Partey, which I guess would it says a lot about their play. Also, we've seen Odegaard kind of slot next to one or the other of them, which would allow you to bring ESR in at the 10 rather than in the left wing. But there were a significant number of comments that did mention, don't bring him back at all. Bring him on for 30 minutes. Use him back in.
You have to think as well, it's healthy for Emile Smith-Rowe as well, because we have seen these players thrust into the limelight too quick, throwing massive contracts and too much emphasis put on them as individuals too early. And what this does is it lets Emile Smith-Rowe know that it isn't just a straight walk back into the side for you. So not only is it good for the players who have earned the right to keep their spots, it's also healthy, I think, for the ego of Emile Smith-Rowe to know that it isn't just a straight walk back in, and everything coming out of the club would suggest that he'll have no problem dealing with a choice like that.
If we're going to get back to, if we want to get to the level, where we want to be, there's going to be loads of these in the future. You'd hope, where you think that, okay, someone's going to have to miss out. It's a bit like KT. He missed out for a bit, rightly so, in my opinion, because Tavares was playing well. KT came back in, did well, and now he starts, and he'll carry on starting. Like, that's, for me, that's just how football works. Like,
oh, these are good problems to have. I just like stirring shit up where I can, and someone's got to be out for someone to come in. But
there will be people who probably will be like, oh, how we can't leave Emmy out. But like, if we're getting to where we want to get, those are going to be decisions that happen quite often, I think.
Exactly. Now, speaking of bringing somebody in without bringing somebody out, we're going to bring in a friend of mine who is making his debut. In fact, he's breaking his duck on the podcast. Welcome to the Gooners podcast. West Ham fan Kevin McIntosh. Good to see you again, buddy.
Good evening, gentlemen. How nice to meet you all virtually.
You look very. You've met one of us. Well, two of us. You look very relaxed for someone who's.
Live.
You look very relaxed for someone who's cut open their body this evening. How's your finger holding up?
Oh, my finger's fine, actually. It's a standard piece of behaviour here, where you get a bread knife out and cut something badly.
We have a bad history on this podcast of people cutting their fingers open. Didn't it happen to you, Andy? One time you cut your finger open, somebody else cut their finger open. Oh, well,
No.
all right.
That must be on your other podcast.
Must be on my severed finger amputation in you.
Yeah.
So Kevin, life. All right, let me give you a proper introduction. Our sons used to play football together. His son is Ian, not like spelled like Ian, like our Ian. It's a hell of a number 9, by the way. But he's an expat who, unlike Andy, decided to keep his accent. He's a former cricketer, former guy with hair, former a lot of things. But he's West Ham through and through, and we've had a lot of banter over the years. You know, we've talked when our sons were playing together, West Ham finishing 13th, 12th, 10th. I mean, there was a lot of self-deprecating talk in those years. Not that Arsenal was pulling up trees or anything like that during those years, but it's a whole different dynamic right now, man. I mean, you're not dealing with Jack Wilshere and Sebastian Haller and all that anymore. You got quite a team going on right now. But I do want to talk about AubamaWHO, and I wanted to include you in that, but you look pretty relaxed right now. Is that kind of a sign of your overall feeling about West Ham these days?
No, I don't think, as a West Ham supporter, and let's just take into account I've been a West Ham supporter since 1966. I don't think you can ever take anything for granted. 2 years ago, we were facing relegation. Moyes came for a second time, and I didn't like it. But by the time we'd finished with that another relegation year, we actually looked like we had a playing style. We then start the next year, which is the 2021 season, and we continued the same playing style. And we ended up in the Europa League spots. So the whole thing, in a way, is a bit of a shock. I'm wondering whether the bubble's going to burst. And we start looking at games against sides like you lot, where I wonder whether we might actually win them rather than getting our asses kicked.
And so, I mean, it's uncharted territory then, as far as recently is concerned, where because you should be feeling, I think, fairly confident given what we've done when we've played against organized, well-drilled teams. I mean, I know you have a little bit of, I don't want to take anything for granted. I don't want to count my chickens. You have, I guess maybe it's called PTSD from previous years. But, I mean, what would you say at this point is your feeling going into this game? Do you think we have do you think that you guys are the favorite?
I think we should win. We've beaten in the last month Chelsea, Liverpool. We've won the games away that we should have done. I'm not quite sure, and we lost to Manchester City, but I feel as though had we been more adventurous, we'd have got something out of that game. But with David Moyes, that's what you get.
Mm-hmm. See that confidence, Kevin, you're talking about there. Is that coming from the confidence that you have in David Moyes and West Ham at the minute, or is it looking at Arsenal and thinking that they're maybe an easy hit?
I think that if we play the way we can do well. I'm not sure that we have the hugest squad. And when you go into games like the Arsenal game, which historically we have not done well in, you look at your big players to go and win the games. I also wonder what state you guys are in, because you've just had a decent win against Southampton, but
Colorado.
we're playing Southampton on Boxing Day, and I'm looking at our side to lob balls into the box because they're shit at defending corners.
So can we share each other's team's weaknesses and just hope that no one from like our squad hears you, or no one from our squad, your squad hears me, and vice versa? I mean, because we've just spent the whole pod talking about where Arsenal sucks and what we're going to try to do against West Ham. Do you have the players to be able to block us from just playing it out of the back, coming around the side, and doing that whole circle thing? Because if not, I mean, you've got midfielders that are probably a little bit better than ours at this point.
Not if we've got Arthur Basawaki playing at left back.
But probably a better question to ask, Kev, is where did you find joy against?
Where did you?
No, look.
Where did
Michael, you're using a fucking rock band microphone on a podcast. Come on, Jesus Christ, stretch the budget, buddy. Anyway, Kevin, where did you
Google
back to the intelligent conversation? Where did you find joy against the likes of Liverpool, against the likes of these top echelon sides in the Premier League that you otherwise normally wouldn't have got joy out of? What has changed?
Structure and massive mobility at the top end. If you go and look back at both of those games, we endured half a ton of pressure from both sides and managed to manufacture decent opportunities at the other end because we broke at pace. God only knows what we'll do against you lot.
It's literally everything that we're bad at. User.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be an open game. I mean, I don't think that the fear is there for West Ham right now, and because I don't think the fear is there with just about anybody. I mean, Southampton played us a little bit scared, but
yeah, after we've beaten Liverpool and Chelsea, we shouldn't really be scared of anybody. But at the same time, I don't feel like we took the game against Burnley by the scruff of the neck. But that's a different game. So
isn't that always kind of the story of the underdog though? Like you get up for the big games. I mean, we've had this issue over the last couple of games, couple seasons as well, until we completely stopped winning against any good teams. But I mean, we beat City, we beat Liverpool, we beat Chelsea, basically back to back at the beginning of Arteta's career, and then we're losing points to teams like Burnley, like Wolves, like, just dropping points after points after points. So, it is kind of weird to see, a performance against Burnley like you did when you had the Liverpool game and the Chelsea game and the Spurs game, which was a very tidy 1-0 that we were all at together, go the opposite direction. So I don't know. I'm surprised to hear you're a little bit more not confident about Wednesday than you are, but it's going to be a good matchup one way or the other.
I don't think that as a West Ham fan for as long as I've been, you can ever go, yeah, we're going to go and win this game. I think there are games that you would expect to win, but I still wouldn't go into the Arsenal game thinking we're going to take you apart. However, if Moyes gets the structure right, and he does what he did against Burnley in the second half, where we kind of go from a back four that pushes up with Soucek and Rice sitting, you then go and shove Rice up to the number 10 position, then you have a whole different game. I think what Moyes does with the midfield and the creative midfielders, and that doesn't currently include Rice, may well change the game, but Moyes has to be comfortable with the way that the game gets played.
Well, there's a guy also that we have been consistently putting off talking about it. Now, Ryan, I'm going to come to you about this because we talked about ESR coming back in the lineup and who does he displace. Last I heard, AubamaWHO was, I heard mixed comments. I heard one that said his disciplinary actions began on Saturday, which implied that they're not over. And I've heard comments that said that he'll be back in contention to play on Wednesday. So What's your view on? I mean, there's been criticism on Arteta, and Kevin, I'm going to want to have your point of view from the outside on this as well. But dealt with a family issue in Spain, didn't get back in time. Issues with COVID testing, suspended from practice on Friday, out of the 11 on Saturday. Is the captaincy in danger? Is Auba, has he been wronged here, or is this just an example of transgressions? And where do you fall on this?
Well, definitely not. Definitely against anyone criticizing the manager on this one personally. I think this is definitely, in my opinion anyway, this is certainly not the first time this has happened. This hasn't just happened once and, it's like, okay, we've gone public with it, whatever, and it looks bad. This would have been a running thing that's happened on more than one occasion. I reckon he's been spoken to about it. You remember, he didn't play in the Spurs game earlier on because of it. So if that happens, if that's me and that happens to you, I'm making sure something like that's never ever happening again. I'm the captain of the football club. I've missed the game against our local rivals. I've accepted, from what I understand, he accepted responsibility that he did. So to do something like that again, for me, is just, there's no, in terms of him being, me trusting him for that stuff, it's gone completely. I just don't think that's how a captain acts. I don't think Arteta had much choice, really. What's he meant to, if he says he's not in the squad for tactical reasons, like Unai did over Ozil, you get hot. The fans will be turning around going, well, that's a load of rubbish. So it's like Aubameyang. Even if you don't think he should be in the starting 11, everyone thinks he should be in the squad. And then I've got the other side, whereas it's like, you can't change culture. Everyone wants us to change and go back to the old ways and be a big. You can't change that culture of a football club by just letting things like this slide. And it's just really unfortunate that Aubameyang doesn't see it like that. And for me, he let Arteta down. No, there's no way, no debate for me about it. It's on Aubameyang. Arteta, I think, has handled it quite well, because to have to deal with your captain doing this twice in the space of 6 months or whatever is really hard. People might argue he should have taken it away from him. I think we had this discussion, and I said, I think it's really difficult to just take the captaincy away from someone when someone's at the club.
That was my next question to you. Is, once again, Ryan, here we are. Is there a?
I'll be honest with you, Mike. I just don't know. I don't know the answer. There's not a. Last year, I think when Tierney was flying, I probably would have gone, take it off Aubameyang and give it to Tierney. But now with KT, it's like, he's with the injuries and also with Tavares emerging. I don't actually know the answer. I'm open to hearing other people's opinions on who it should be, but it shouldn't be Aubameyang, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, and if you haven't read the Athletic article today, it provides some background behind kind of the timing and the reasoning, and gives a pretty balanced view of what Aubameyang might have been thinking, and why he may think that he's wronged versus what the club said. It's a little more nuanced than a lot of people seem to think it was. Originally, I was under the impression he just didn't show up for practice on Friday and then went and got a tattoo. Apparently, it's a very much more nuanced thing about visiting his mother in Spain and not getting back, and COVID testing, and he was back in time for practice, but they wouldn't let him do it because he hadn't had a COVID test, so on and so forth. But I mean,
wait, are you saying, Mike, that Twitter and Arsenal fans overreacted about a situation they knew nothing about and built a narrative around that?
I'm not saying they didn't. They overreacted. I'm saying the information was more nuanced.
But regardless of the information, look, as Ryan stated, this isn't the first time, and even though the circumstances, obviously at the time, when I think it was his mother wasn't well, and then he had malaria, and then he was late to the north. Regardless of the circumstances, Arsenal have been more than flexible with Pierre Emerick Aubameyang. They didn't have to let Pierre Emerick Aubameyang go anywhere. Contractually, should have had been at training, but they obviously gave him that bit of breathing space to go and do whatever he was wanting to do under certain conditions, and he took liberties with those conditions. And regardless of
come back Wednesday night, came back Tuesday, Thursday
regardless
morning, and
of
that set everything in motion.
Look, and it isn't like, like if his flight was delayed or whatever. I'm pretty sure Mikel Arteta isn't hanging Pierre Emerick Aubameyang out to dry for something that wasn't within his control. Like if his flight was delayed, that's fine. I'm sure they would have grasped it. Yeah. There's obviously been something done, him being lackadaisy with the rules. And the truth is that, as Ryan said, we're trying to change a culture, a soft culture that had been at Arsenal. And this isn't somebody who doesn't come with a history of this. Borussia Dortmund and their fan base were relatively happy to see Aubameyang move on when he came to us. And now, granted, I think he's been a fabulous player for it, but there's only so much piss-taking you can do with the rules. You're supposed to be setting an example to other young players. We're a youthful squad, and for them to be looking up to him, seeing him doing stuff like that is shocking. And I think he does completely undermined and betrayed the trust of Mikel Arteta. For all the flaws that I think Arteta has, he's acted perfectly in this. And for me, he should never put the captain's armband again, because what he's done, although it wasn't just as public, it's just as disrespectful as what Granit Xhaka did at Crystal Palace.
Well, it's an interesting take, and I like, before I go to you, Andy, I like getting the opinion on this handling of this situation, especially from those who tend to be a little bit more critical of Mikel Arteta and his historical man management and decisions than I am. Listen to the Highbury squad before this, and Kev tends to be quite pro Arteta. Sophie's obviously been much more critical of Arteta, but I think they both align perfectly in the sense, although Sophie's often been anti-Aubameyang because she doesn't, she has no time, as most people don't, for for players who are just pissing off and making their own rules. But I think it's important when you have someone who generally tends to take the piss out of Arteta every chance that they get, which is not you, Owen, but the more you're like that and you still think that this was handled the right way by him, I think that says a lot. Do you take the captain's armband away from Andy, or do you have a completely different viewpoint on this situation altogether because you hate how people always get up in arms about shit like this?
No, I can't disagree with anything that Ryan or Owen said, or you for that matter, except for the fact that I would allow him to keep the armband, because the armband for me has been cursed since as I said before, since Patrick Vieira. Okay, Gallas sat down in the middle of a match and just basically threw his toys out of the pram. Then Xhaka, rightly or wrongly, told our fans where to go, and a small percentage shouldn't have done it. So for me, and then Aubameyang is played as a joke. Just this weekend, we saw a player on the pitch who hasn't extended a contract with Arsenal, and it's very likely he won't get a contract being given the armband. So I will say, let's keep the armband on Aubameyang as he digs himself the hole, because it is a cursed armband, and we just leave it there for now, and we kind of see what plays out. We have a lot of young players. Personally, for me, if we were going to take it off him, it would go to KT, or I'd give it to Ramsdale, just because he's a voice of the team, right, when you're on the pitch. But he takes he's taken advantage of the scenario that he's in. And as an employee who is paid £300,000 a week, there's no confusion when and where you need to be for your COVID test. I got family flying over from England in like a week, and they are all fucking experts as where you're going for the test, who's giving you the test, when you need the test, how you get on your flight. He has all that people that do that for him. He's a cunt.
Okay, so no, I mean,
he is. I'm sorry, but like, you don't act that way as a professional footballer. I mean, and it's not just. I mean, okay, let's like getting a little like bigger minded here, but it's not just like the world we're living in with COVID now. I mean, I don't care to know your political, if you're vaccinated, you guys personally, but like, there are a lot of people, younger people, who look at what Aubameyang's doing and breaking these rules and thinking, well, if a guy like that can do it, then I can do it. And it's like, well, no, that's not how the world lives right now and works. Like, there are protocols set in place.
Well, right? We've worked so hard to get that attitude out of our club, and then here it is, then he just back again.
Yeah. Now, like Owen said, if it's a missed flight, or if it's a delayed flight or something where it's out of his control, then we never hear about this. But this is the second time now you have been stripped of a match. The first one being a North London derby. This one, not so much. He's not going to play against West Ham, which is going to be.
I don't know that.
No, he won't, because just the news story that we're seeing. So for me, he's a twat and he needs to leave. Fuck off.
He's been
Sorry, Ryan.
In a pattern where he's been in a pattern where basically after 3 years he's been so prolific with his goal scoring that he tends to say, okay, well now I'd like special privileges. I'm going to act like Johnny Big Balls around here. I'm in good shape. That happened when he was 26. It happened when he was 29.
Sorry, Mike. Sorry to interrupt.
It just so happens now to be happening during a time period where his play is crap too, and he's got obligations.
If he was banging in a goal every match, if he had 16 goals on the season, if he was Salah type of level, I would be like, who gives a fuck what he's doing? Let him do whatever he's doing, right?
Oh, and
that's not the case.
That's an interesting thing because I actually disagree with that. And if you're trying to set an example, then set an example.
But you're. My point was, he's so good, you can't keep him out of the.
Dublin Gooners says, Andy, Arsenal fans overreacted. Andy, minutes later, he's like,
well, yeah, because listen, Dublin. They're overreacting about a story they know nothing about. I know Aubameyang's a cunt based off of specific facts that we've seen in most recent years. I want to have a fucking statue at this cup. Fuck off. You just got paid a shit ton of money. That's why you're saying it.
Kevin, I know
you've got to ask if he was. What annoys me a bit about this is if he was at Man City, I don't think he'd do that.
Yeah.
So in a way, he's treating the fans with some disrespect because if he was at or Real Madrid or something, I don't think he does this stuff. So in a way, it's kind of like I'm doing it because I feel like I can do it, even though the fact that you said earlier, where I need allowances made for it. The allowance that's been made is that you're getting paid £300,000 a week.
Right.
That's your reward. Not to sort of get away with doing other little things. Like for me, that's a real no. Like that.
Yeah, non-negotiables include team rules. Negotiables, by their very definition, include salaries. You negotiate a salary. He got himself a $350,000 wage packet, and that's the negotiable part.
Pounds.
Based on it, what I say, dollars.
Stupid money.
That's why I said dollars, Andy, because I'm Jewish. Right, so, Kevin.
Here he is mentioning he's Jewish again.
The outsider view. West Ham, no stranger to player power struggles. Dimitri Payet is one that I can think of. I'm sure you can talk about others, but what's your view on what we're dealing with our with the guy who scored probably 2/3 of our goals over the last 3 seasons, but is on a very, very cold spell right now, missing practices and getting discipline? What would you do?
So one of the things that I understand about the way that West Ham have progressed this year is there's been this team togetherness. It's been, we all do this together, we will move forward together, we win together, we lose together. The second you have somebody who decides they're going to go and change the rules and do something completely different is divisive. There's stuff like wage structures, and you have players who are getting paid 350,000 whatevers versus 70,000 whatevers. But eventually you will muck in. The second you allow one person to change the rules, dictate how the club views you as one person, is just completely divisive. Fuck off, go away. Dimitri Payet, fuck off, go away. Marco Arnautovic, fuck off, go away.
Oh, we can all agree on that.
So why should you have? You get paid to play a game. You get paid a lot to play a game. For fuck's sake, behave properly, turn up, train, support your teammates, go and play for the club, and more importantly, the supporters. Because eventually the club is nowhere The club is nothing without the supporters. We've just discovered that by playing games during COVID, where we've had empty stadiums, and it's shit.
Yeah, you had some whacked out results and unenjoyable football.
Well, and I'm
Can we add Andy Carroll to that as well? I mean, like, let's just keep. I just want to keep talking about West Ham.
But you're talking about what I don't understand, right? Is you're talking about a contracted employee, right?
Yes.
At what point does Arsenal turn around and disregard the captain's armband, because that's just a different conversation. But at what point can a club turn around and say the fuckery is stopped? You're no longer an employee here because you're breaking your contract.
But
and Mike, I know you're shaking your head, but you're a contracted employee, and you know.
Yeah, if me or you did that, that's what would happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But Andy,
but we're at will employees. They're not at will employees.
Not necessarily.
Jesus,
you don't know
Mike.
the contract, right?
Oh, I sign off on all of them.
And there's a bigger game as well, which is that the side goes tits up, and it's always the manager that gets sacked. Mm-hmm. Yet, when you look at the whole thing, the players decide they're not going to support their contracts, and because they don't like the way that the manager's doing things, they'll go, well, fuck off, I just won't bother. But at the end of it, who actually suffers? It's the supporters.
The people paying the salaries.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because it's always
we don't do it.
It's always been said when you have a bad culture at your team, it's easier to sack the coach than sack 18 players. Arsenal are in the process of trying to prove that wrong. We've sacked this, you know, in one form or another, about 9 players in the last 18 to 24 months, while keeping the same manager and keeping with that same process and that same. It'll be interesting to see how it turns out, because, you know, we could keep chopping and changing with managers and bring in 10 Hog and bring in 11 Hog and 15 Hog or however many Hogs you want to bring in. And if the same players are doing the same crap and undermining the team, it's going to be the same outcome. So, it will be interesting if you can show that over 2.5 years, you can. I've used that joke and gotten so many people annoyed at me. I love that Ryan is dying.
I'm 100% stealing that joke.
About this is that because Ryan is laughing, Mike is like, "Yes, I'm the comedian I thought."
It's like if you went to do 5 comedy shows and the first 4 people threw food and lettuce and beets and tomatoes at you, and then the 5th one they're all rolling on the ground. Yes,
first time I've heard that. So that's why.
Let's take another step because this has been the perennial West Ham problem. You have a fan base. You have a squad, and you find a manager who you think might actually do some useful things. But given that you're getting paid 180,000 quid a year for the broadcast things, it means that you can't afford to get relegated. So the natural thing to do is, if you're shit, you ditch the manager and get another bloke in. But if you take a more strategic approach and you can actually survive, you might actually build something. And heaven forbid, and I was seriously anti-Moyes, we might suddenly be getting somewhere. So the question I suppose I'm asking you lot is, how long do you put up with a manager before you ditch him?
I'll go here first quick, because I don't like Arteta as a manager.
Let's do this, then predictions, and then we'll
okay. I don't like Arteta as a manager, but I do see the board have obviously backed him heavily with investment, and so I think he's the next manager for 2 to 3 years. Kevin, I don't know if Mike shared with you, but I'm raised by a Hammer, brother-in-law, best friend. They're all diehard season ticket holders, and they were all in the same boat you are. They hated Moyes, and now they all love him. So I'm hoping that changes with me, right, where Arteta molds. I think this winter will be important. I do think we'll probably dip into the transfer window for a striker, and I think that's going to speak volumes for. I think that, like as Ryan said earlier, that's probably the one position on the pitch that Arteta has not addressed himself. I will say that from I want to give Arteta more time to get rid of some of this dead weight. We know Lacazette's going to be gone. Aubameyang's likely going to be gone. Maybe 2 or 3 other players with Bellerin, Torreira, Guendouzi, get them all off the wage bill. I do think he's going to bring in more players. We're starting to see his team, and we're not playing bad football. There's been some bumps in the road, but ultimately, like, it's not awful, right? So I say we give him more time. I don't want to keep circulating managers who want to bring in their own players. I think we need to give him the opportunity. And my prediction for the weekend, and I'm going to say this, Kevin, with no disrespect to you, but West Ham are a one-trick pony, so we get Antonio out of the match. We're pretty much going to win 2-1, but we won't do that because we're shit, so we're going to lose 3-1.
That was the most – it's almost as though you're, like, on something.
I think that's about as coherent as my dog going for a tiddle in first thing in the morning.
Well, exactly, and that's what you get from the Gooners podcast. So, all right, so Ryan, your thoughts on kind of the manager versus firing everyone in the club or sacking everyone in the club in order to create a new culture, and then your prediction for Wednesday.
Okay, so in the same style as Andy, I'd say I really like Arteta as a man. I like him less as a manager, but I like him enough to see it out to the end of the season. I think at the end of the season, that's when I'd look again, like assess again. I definitely, as I said earlier, like I don't want it to be just that after every defeat, it feels like we talk about the manager. For me, I said after those horrible first 3 games, he has until November. And I think when we got to November, we were 5th. And so therefore, if he got us into that position, I'd want him to see it out to the end of the season. And that's still where I am. In terms of, I feel like we are going to pick up 4 points in the next 2 games against West Ham or Leeds. So I think we're either going to beat West Ham and then draw with Leeds, or we're going to draw with West Ham and then beat Leeds. So I think 4 points from the next 2. And as long as we then go on to beat Norwich and Wolves as the Christmas fixtures, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, we'd almost have to be in 4th if we end up with that kind of result. 10 out of the next 12 again.
Exactly.
Prediction for Wednesday. Having just said that you either think we're going to draw or win, now we need a prediction. We need a prediction, a score.
I think we're going to beat West Ham and draw to Leeds on the week. I think that will be a tough game. I think we'll beat West Ham 2-1.
Okay, we need all the scores and the minutes that they're going to score and the type of goal that they're going to score. We don't have to worry about Rabonas because Payet and Lamela are not playing in that game. So, no. All right. So you're picking a victory. Andy picked everything. Owen, what are you going with? And you're. I mean, as we know, someone who doesn't tend to think Arteta belongs in the job that he's in. What are your thoughts with regards to changing coaches versus changing culture?
No, well, something I always think I've done is, even though I've been quite clear of my opinions of him as a coach, is to give him a fair crack at the whip. And I think that you can compartmentalize each of them first 3 games, with the lack of availability from some of the incomings that he took in and stuff like that. And after that, I said I wanted to give him until Christmas. And I'll say, I said my only issue is that every big challenge that we've faced, every big test, the major ones that matter, we've failed so far. And for me, although, as Kev has said, historically West Ham have been further down the pecking order than some might see them now, they're definitely up there. And I would say, well, obviously at current, they're our main rival for that 4th spot, barring Manchester United's form picking up. But for me, I don't think like Andy. I think they're a much more well-rounded side than just lumping the ball into Antonio. That's what they were prior, but now with the likes of Bowen, there's a lot more sophistication to the way that they attack and a lot more ways that they can break you down than they could in previous years. But in saying that, my head says draw, but my heart says a win. So, but I'll go with my heart, and I think that we're going to get a 3-2 win. I think it's going to be a really high-scoring game. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier that they're not going to fear us, and I think that the days of us hitting the back of the net and sitting back are probably over due to the heavy criticism that both the players and the manager have come under. So I'll go for a 3-2 win.
They will be kicking us all over the pitch, though. I think we've shown that that's an effective way of beating Arsenal, especially when nobody calls anything from a referee standpoint. A couple people in the chat giving their views. Chris Moss 2-1 to Gooners. Then some transfer window ideas. Anyone else in the chat want to pipe in with your predictions as well? For me, again, I've gone all over the map on this Arteta thing. There have been a couple of situations where I've gotten very close to thinking a change was necessary, and I always end up kind of walking myself back off that ledge, because not just because of results, but because of some situational things, like the way he's handling this AubamaWHO thing, the way that he's kind of and whether this is all him or a combination of him and Adu, or if it's coming from above, which I highly doubt. The way that there was a thread on yesterday morning on Twitter from a very, very pro Arteta person. I'm not even going to publicize it. You can go and find it. Put Arteta Ten Hag, because he wrote about Ten Hag and how easy Ajax's entire structure is for a manager to succeed in, and how hard it has been in the Premier League for Arteta, and comparing the two. And it's an interesting thread. He goes way over the line on a lot of things, I think, just looking for ways to praise Arteta. But he also makes some very good points that there are some systemic changes to the club, to the culture, to the structure, to the fitness, to the rules, to the age profile, to the contract profile. And you can't do that overnight. That's the process that I think a lot of people are talking about and getting sick of hearing about. It's not just, do we sit back after going up on a 1-goal lead and clearly there's no plan, and his substitutions against Everton were absolutely diabolical, and all those things. Yes, those can be true while still building something for the future. And just like Kevin said, he's come around on Moyes, who is the opposite of Arteta. He's an experienced coach that sometimes you feel might be limited, as opposed to an inexperienced coach who you don't feel deserves to be in a job, being as inexperienced as he is. But, I'm willing to kind of see how this develops. I realize that if it doesn't develop and we eventually get nowhere, that we're going to have missed out on changing something when we still could. But I'm all for it. So at this point, I'm still in on it. And I think the player power thing that we thought we had gotten rid of when Ozil and his crew were banished needs to happen again here, and we'll be better off for it. So the Royal Me is going to go with 2-2, because I cannot pick an Arsenal win. Anytime I do, we lose. And so we're going to finish off the podcast with two things from Kevin: one, a prediction, and one, a very important piece of information on something that's near and dear to our hearts, and that we wanted to make sure we talked about. So Kevin, first, what do you think about the game? Are you feeling confident?
Yeah, reasonably. We've got a brand new back four because most of them are injured. But I also think that we have a lot of firepower moving forward. I've got a sneaky feeling that we have plenty of pace, lots of creativity. I think you're susceptible to playing on the break, to us playing on the break. And I think you're going to be uncomfortable with that. I think you're going to be struggling with lots of pace. So I'm going to go 3-1 to us.
3-1. You said 3-1 to us, meaning West Ham, right? Right. Okay. I didn't know if you said 3-1 to us or 3-1 to Arsenal, because sometimes us and Arsenal sound the same when
I don't need to learn arse, Mike.
Okay. And please do tell us. You mentioned something to me earlier today, and you know how much this podcast tries to look after. Talk about the community of not just Gooners, but football fans in general. Try to find the best of how we support each other in tough times. And you have been very close to a situation with West Ham that I think deserves some attention and hopefully some generosity from anyone listening. So tell us a little bit about Isla. Is it Isla Caton?
It's Isla Caton, yeah. She's 7. She's been struggling with neuroblastoma for her entire life. Poor little bugger has dealt with that day after day, week after week, month after month. And she is moving through gears in terms of new treatments. She's having a struggle. It's not looking good. She hasn't got any hair. So if you guys, anybody out there does a search on Isla, Islacaton, go look at that, contribute what you can. There's a guy called Baz who does a trip round the West Ham Stadium with the buckets, and he collects change every week, and he gets chucked in there, and it contributes to her. So we're looking at grassroots up to whatever you can do. So Isla Caton, poor little bugger, 7 years old.
Yeah, and you said that she's been diagnosed as being term. I mean, she's got a very little period of time to go.
Her bone marrow is failing, so she hasn't got much time.
Please do. If you the link below is to her Just Giving page. It's a long link, so I'm sure if you look up Just Giving and Isla Caton, Islacaton, you can learn more about it. And thanks, Kevin, for making us aware of that. It's as I've talked about in the past, Gooners versus cancer. I'm hoping to grow into football versus cancer, because as we've seen with players from Bournemouth, fans and support and clubs and teams, and obviously that goes back to situations dealt with our own club's legends, as we know, way too too sadly in many cases. Football knows no badge. They don't know. I'm sorry, cancer knows no badge, no loyalties, no tribalism. It's just something that we've got to work together to try to get rid of altogether. Right. So thank you, Kevin, for sharing that with me, for coming on and giving your viewpoint on Arsenal and West Ham. It's going to be a massive tie. I'm going to be nervous as heck. We'll find out if we're doing I think we might be doing a post game on Highbury Squad after that one. So stay tuned to the Twitter account for more announcements. Owen, Andy, Ryan, Kevin, great to spend some time with you tonight. We got to get back doing this on a weekly basis. It's this last couple months has been a little too scarce.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe if you stop traveling everywhere.
Well, maybe if you stop selling popsicles everywhere, we can get back and doing this again. So
I was going to make your mom joke, but
yeah, let's not do that. All right. So Owen, thanks. Anywhere we can find you? You're doing the podcast rounds.
No, don't find me. It's fine.
So okay, Andy, Ryan, anything you wanna publicize? Are you
just Andy, Ryan?
Anywhere that are you still looking over your shoulder, like just making sure I'm not following you?
No, I'm looking forward to your next trip back.
I hope it's in April with my son, but it's looking less and less likely. But one more time, just for posterity's sake, 15 hug, 11 hug, 12 hug. I gotta have something to go for. All right, and Kevin, appreciate it. Is he playing football this winter? What's he up to? What's his football right now?
Well, he's about to go to Spain, and then Germany, and he's doing trials with professional sides.
Keep this name. Keep Ian. It's IAIN McIntosh in your search history. Google him. Hopefully, within a couple of years, you'll see pictures of him playing football, not doing other things. But you never know with that guy. So he's a precocious 18-year-old. So anyway, thanks for joining us. This has been the Gooners podcast. More after West Ham, and come on, you Gooners.